Warning. The following review is for a visual novel which contains mature content, i.e. sex, violence, and man-eating worms. If this type of thing disturbs or offends you, I recommend you stop watching because I will be discussing it. All of the overly sensitive people gone? Okay, perfect. On with the review. Rarely have I ever felt so conflicted after finishing a story. On one hand, the endings were brilliant, and my first impulse was to proclaim from the rooftops how this is the best thing ever. Then I remembered some of the crap I had to wade through to get to that point, and how bloody long the thing was, and I had to reconsider. Today, a review of the story in question, Fate Stay Night. Fate Stay Night is set in an imaginary city in modern-day Japan, where the 5th Holy Grail War is taking place. The premise of the Grail War is as follows. There are 7 participants called Masters. They summon the spirits of ancient heroes called Servants to aid them, and they go around trying to slaughter each other. The last one standing gets the Holy Grail, which, instead of being a holy relic of the Christian faith, is more like a cheap genie in a bottle that only grants 1 wish instead of 3. The story follows our protagonist Shiro Emiya, a high school student and clueless master who accidentally summoned a servant and has no idea what he's got himself into. After watching him bumble around for 3 days, the story splits into 3 main routes: Fate, Ultimate Blade Works, and Heaven's Feel, each which centers around one of the main 3 heroines of the novel, Saber, Rin, and Sakura. Fate Stay Night has a cast of characters that can pretty much be summarized like this. Douchebag, does nothing, supreme douchebag, comic relief, badass crazy priest, psychotic little girl, enemies 1, 2, 3, and 4, extremely evil douchebag, and don't worry, I'll actually give a proper description of the main characters. Our protagonist, Shiro, is honest, righteous, kind, and overall very bland. He can occasionally also be rather sexist, as demonstrated in case A, B, and C. Honestly, I half expected him to tell one of the heroines, "Bitch, stay in the kitchen and make me a sandwich," if he didn't already spend half the time in the kitchen himself. The 3 heroines are slightly better. We have Saber, Shiro's servant, who is the very spirit of nobility and dignity. While often acting with elegance and restraint, she has a surprising childlike innocence hidden underneath that. Next, we have Rin Tosaka, another high school student master who, unlike Shiro, is actually relatively competent. She's eminently pragmatic and tries to make sure Shiro doesn't make too many noble but stupid choices or just plain stupid choices. She's also a huge tsundere, but not of the baka punch your head through the wall variety, and she can actually be rather cunning at times. Lastly, we have Sakura, who in the first 2 routes just appears to fulfill the role of the sweet, perfectly innocent underclassman, but in the 3rd route, well, you'll just have to find out when you get there. The best part of Fate Stay Night is easily its plot, which is a good thing because that's generally the most important part of any story. The first route, Fate, has a plot that, while being somewhat of a generic shonen thingy, is enjoyable and has a truly touching ending. The plot for Ultimate Blade Works goes deeper with some interesting morality questions and unexpected plot twists, and Heaven's Feel? Well, it goes completely off the deep end with a plot that is incredibly dark, unpredictable, and also rather compelling. I had more than a couple late nights that turned into early mornings reading it. The endings to these routes are also supremely satisfying, and there's enough variety to them that you should be able to find at least one that you enjoy. Another real strength of Fate Stay Night is the choice system. First of all, the choices are actually clear enough to be useful and meaningful. Better than, what type of donut would you like to eat? Secondly, if you do make a wrong choice, the game lets you know fairly quickly by having you die a gruesome death within a couple of minutes of you making it. After you die, you go to a place called Tiger Dojo, which gives you hints as to how to get past that point without dying, and this makes mistakes far less frustrating than they would be otherwise. Also, the Tiger Dojos can be pretty funny sometimes, so it's worthwhile dying on occasion. Pacing is a big problem with this story. All the routes, particularly the Fate route, really drag at the start, and it takes a while for things to get interesting. I guess the writers wanted to show a bit of Shiro's normal life before he got dragged into a life and death battle, but honestly, his normal life is just plain boring. Who would have thought? Given that Fate Stay Night's about 60 hours long, the lag bits account for a significant chunk of time, and you really do need some patience to get through it. The story also has some bizarre obsession with cooking. It's not uncommon for the story to give a detailed description of the preparation of all 3 meals for the day, regardless of what else is going on. We just got back from a life and death battle. Now, time to chop up some vegetables for dinner. I can only put forward an educated guess, but I'm pretty sure most of the people reading it are not so enthralled by the culinary arts that it was really necessary to tell us everything the protagonist cooked and ate. Lastly, I'd like to talk a bit about sex. I'm not completely against the idea of having sex in a story, and honestly I think it can add to the story given the proper context behind it. That being said, Fate Stay Night did it wrong. You see, in Fate Stay Night, they came up with sex equals magical power transfer, which they then used as an excuse to tack on some hentai scenes. Using sex scenes to show how character relationships have developed is not unreasonable, but including it because of some bizarre magical rule that the writers came up with feels really cheap. Other than in the Heaven's Feel route, which let's just say is special, these scenes feel really out of place with the rest of the story. When I came to the end of Fate Stay Night, it felt like I had finished an epic saga. It has some flaws which drag it down, but it's a hell of a long way from being bad, and I highly recommend reading it if you have enough free time. For the scores, I give it a 9.5 out of 10 for plot, a 7 out of 10 for characters, 5 out of 10 for pacing, and 10 out of 10 for my own personal enjoyment, giving Fate Stay Night an overall score of 7.9 out of 10. And normally I would now give ultimate reading recommendations and all that jazz, but instead I'm going to give a couple suggestions to anyone looking at reading Fate Stay Night. First of all, don't just stop after the Fate route. It is by far the weakest of the 3 routes, and even if you didn't enjoy it that much, there's a good chance you'll still love the other 2 routes. Secondly, I know I mentioned this before, but I cannot emphasize enough that the Heaven's Feel route is really freaking disturbing in a way that completely sets it apart from the other 2. I'd still suggest reading it because it's brilliantly written, but be prepared for a couple of nightmares after reading it, and do not read it at work. Lastly, if you haven't seen the original anime adaptation of Fate Stay Night yet, wait until you finish the visual novel before you look at it. You'll get a lot more out of the Fate route that way. Anyways, that brings my review to a close. Thanks for listening. Cheers!